Alrighty, here's another one. Good to see you again. Um, I want to talk about focus today. Focus was something we were not good at. Stubbornness was something we were great at. I think, at a young age to come into a position where we actually own a business was a big deal, something we were very proud of, even till this day. But the issue is without having a mentor, without having any guidance, without having anyone to really look up to, in the sense of, making sure that we're doing the right thing, it was more so all about sort of treading into the unknown without knowing which way to go, without having direction, without having pretty much any guidance whatsoever, right? So obviously, what would happen is that we would fall into common issues that startup owners have, that people who go into business actually wind up meeting face to face. And one of them is focus. Until this very day, it's funny because there are individuals that I know, that I've met, where even though they've built such a great sort of foundation, they've built their own business, their own company to a certain degree, where they're still not able to focus. And what I mean by this is more so focusing on one thing at a time. In terms of growing a business, it's to not space yourself out and work on multiple different projects at the same time for multiple different companies. Even to this day, like I've sort of compressed it down to two things, but they're highly related to each other. So, sort of one thing. So, stubbornness still exists. But in saying that, I think last time we talked about sort of working with our weaknesses that we can't change to turn it into strengths, right? Because that's probably the best thing you can do if it's beyond, your capability. So, in terms of focus, what we did back then, right? Dabble into music, dabble into fashion, dabble into weddings, dabble into real estate. It was natural for us because of the nature of the work we were doing. So, as content creators back then, it was very easy to um, create content for multiple different types of industries, not necessarily specializing. I think what we were good at is creating beautiful imagery, beautiful visuals, right? Which later turns into more storytelling and like composing and all that stuff. But didn't really dive too far into that because we transitioned into business and then obviously transitioned into operations, well, not obviously, but that formed into operations, which formed into what we're doing now, or what I'm doing now, which is more um, project management, essentially. So, what do I mean by focus? Again, let's track back there. I really want to drill this into you because it's so important and it's such a waste of time if you spend 10, 15 years on multiple projects and not being able to fully grow and let each business actually evolve. It's nothing wrong with having multiple businesses, but the issue is if you haven't grown one fully, right, to an extent where you're looking at exiting, or it's in a steady state where it can autonomously flow without you, then you shouldn't be looking at a secondary business, right? Yes, granted, I do have two things going on right now, which is the consulting side and also an academy side where I'm still, that's the new sort of baby that I'm growing. But essentially, it's hand in hand in a sense where the work on the consulting side feeds into the academy. So, what I plan to do is actually have both running, but ultimately transition to the academy because What I love doing more and what I've realized now is that I do like talking. I do like communicating with people. I do like helping people. I do love, deep diving into people's situations and then cross referencing my own experiences and my own stories to help them sort of shed light on the unknown and give them a means to grasp on something that exists out there that is related to their own sort of pain, their own story, their own process, and eventually get to, another side where they can grow whilst utilizing, some of my stories and some of my experiences as, a point to hook onto, to latch onto, to then swing to the next part. So, not necessarily dictating what people should be doing, but more so sharing my experience so that they can know that there's other people out there who went through similar things. So again, going back to focus, right now, if I remember correctly, there was a few passion projects that we did, right? Street Browser, where we went to Pitt Street and we were photographing 15 people per week about their outfits, asking about what brands they were wearing, like what their job roles were, and pretty much just getting to know the people on the street. And that was fantastic. It allowed us to develop a lot of communicative skills. We actually learned how to develop a brand, um, and we were using that to actually cross into other brands. So by asking people what clothes they were wearing, when we were posting it on Instagram, we were able to actually tag the actual manufacturers of these brands. So I think the funny thing is, if we actually focused on that, I know it wasn't generating any income. And yes, we were using Centrelink payments to pay our staff. But if we just focused on that, I think at this point we would be quite an established, well known brand within the fashion industry within Sydney, which could have expanded out to Melbourne, which, well, I haven't really thought about it deeply enough to actually know how we were going to generate income, but it would have been the typical online sort of influencer type route where we would generate content and get paid through platforms like YouTube, through ads, or sell merch or whatever it is, right? Sell something that's relative to what we were doing, or potentially stitching up sponsorship deals, to actually get brands in front of, everybody else, so to speak, because we were developing sort of like a space where people in fashion within Sydney were coming to, right? I think the beautiful part of it was stopping individuals, having conversations, creating that connection, taking a photo, and then putting it on our galleries, so to speak, right? I think that was a beautiful part of it where, you know, they would go home. Next thing you know, they've popped up on our feed and they can tell all their friends, oh, I got stopped by this street browser fashion thingamabobby, the fashion police. And then they thought I was, they thought I had a great outfit and they loved it and they took a photo, blah blah blah, this and that, right? I think that would have been quite magical in the sense of creating something where it would benefit society in the sense of uniting people within the fashion industry to come and actually be presented on, this gallery, so to speak, because people take the time to groom themselves. They have skincare routines. They spend the money to buy clothes, which doesn't necessarily equate to like a return on investment. It's more always going to be like a hobby, right? But also to another extent, helping manufacturers get their clothing noticed, right? Not that they needed it at this point, but it could be, say, for example, if we grew it to a substantial size, right? Where essentially we could have a lot of exposure and every post would get however many amount of views, right? And then we could run sponsorship deals, we could run ads, and then potentially generate, some wealth out of this passion project. That could have been one of the outcomes. So if I'm talking to that person in that timeline, keep going. Again, what else did we do back then? Well, that was the fashion side. Then there's the music side. That's another ball game in itself. Again, still sort of like that influencer art. If we kept focusing on creating content around music instead of creating content for Street Browser, but practicing music afterwards, trying to make music but not knowing anything at all. Like, and that specific point in my timeline, if I'm catching you there, I would say, if this is your choice, then drop everything else and go out and meet producers. Go and film more music videos, because we did a music video for somebody else and they got 1.4 million views in 1 week. So again, I understand why, we kept it as something prominent to ourselves and we were too stubborn to let it go, is because we were creating something beautiful, something of substance in every area that we were working in. So it's not like we were doing it for nothing. We were doing it to find validation, and we got validation, right? But it's such a waste, because Street Browser, the fashion project, got validation, right? We were creating a community. We were known by people. We were there every Thursday. And due to focus, we had to shut that down, right? Same thing for the music, right? We shut that down because we realized we don't know how to make money, and we pursued business instead and dropped the ball there, right? And then there's wedding videography. We did that, and that was surprisingly easy looking back, like brides and grooms, they're very easy to sell in a sense where it's such a chaotic process, especially in Sydney, where people spend large amounts of money on their wedding because it's a one time event. Really, it doesn't happen again, right? For most people. Hopefully, you don't have to get married more than once. But in saying that, a lot of money gets put down for most people in traditional scenarios, right? And the reason why the sale is easy is, again, we know how to resonate with people. It's just a matter of sitting down, having the conversation, showcasing the skill set, and away we go. Fortunately, again, Street Browser was sort of a validating tool to actually help us get, the first gig in weddings. And then from that first gig, it sort of just rolled on because we had the content. People saw what we did. We were selling albums. We were creating beautiful imagery. Everything was great. Um, and in a sense, looking back, if I were to pick again, I probably would have picked that. Where I am now is pretty good. But in saying that, if we were to focus on that pathway, then it would be a matter of, if I were to offer advice, look into marketing, look into creating a well oiled machine where you're able to capture enough leads, right? The first goal would be one wedding a week, right? So 52 weddings a year, around 3 to 5 to 7 grand, you're good, right? You are breaking that first 100K mark, which is the hardest thing to do for any business, right? That first 100K mark for any business owner out there is sort of like your degree, so to speak, to get into entrepreneurship. If you can't crack that mark, then you're still learning, chances are, right? Because from 100K to a million, you probably already have all the tools that you need to understand how to scale and get yourself across the line, and then work on 10xing that first 100K. So, in saying that, weddings would have been great. I guess the fear for me now that's just, revolving around my head was more so, how do we even get these leads? I'm not, I wouldn't say my strength is marketing, but in saying that, if we figured it out back then it could be quite lucrative, in the sense where it could probably generate enough capital to actually look at what we've done to get the first 100K, systemize everything, and then hire staff, like go on the journey of finding staff to actually get them to repeat the process, and then we step back, right? So that could have been a very profitable journey, because at the end of the day, the reason why we dropped the ball on everything was because of money, right? I think, I think I know, looking back, there was a looming cloud over my head where it's like, you know, we're living in our parents' place, they are the safety net, and it feels like we are a leech, you know, um, living under this roof, not paying for, the mortgage, not paying for utilities, all of that jazz. Even if we wanted to, they wouldn't let us because they're great parents. But in saying that, I feel like looking back and seeing the housing market as it is now, it's not that bad to actually stay home. It really isn't. But I think here we are as people seeking independency, seeking, to create our own foundation, to live off our own means, was more important than actually considering whether or not it's good to rent or buy in the market within Sydney, Australia. It is absolutely bananas. Anyways, what else did we do? Um, I think there was a moment, yeah, I think I know. There was a moment where we tried to do e-commerce, and we partnered up with another clothing brand to actually launch the e-com store. Great for the whole Yes Man vibe. But again, we were producing YouTube shows at the time for fun, just out of curiosity and out of passion, which was great. Again, that show could have been something else if we just focused on that, right? And for the viewers out there, you'll probably see that, you know, I did have the ambition to do a lot of things, and I did try a lot of things. And I think in hindsight, for me, it was the lack of mentorship and covering that basis, like covering that hole, not knowing that I actually needed that, but covering that issue by actually trying everything so I could learn everything, so that I could ultimately choose one thing to be very good at, right? But looking back now, would I change things? No. It led me to where I am today. Would I advise someone to do that? Probably not. I think focusing on one thing is so much more beneficial, even though you don't get to dabble and experience skills in other industries. At the end of the day, there's only so many skills that you can master, that you should master, right? Because if you excel in one skill set and it becomes your most valuable skill set, other people will pay you lots of money to do that skill set, right? And if you choose correctly and you align with that skill set, then what happens is it doesn't become, work that you dread. It becomes work that is easy. More so, it becomes something you're passionate about and something you don't mind doing every day, right? And if it's a highly skilled, a highly valued skill, sorry, then what could happen is that you learn to package and sell that, and then you create a lot of wealth, and then money becomes a tool, and then you can use that wealth to actually cover all your other bases, right? And the more beautiful thing is you find other people who can do the same thing, and then you turn it into a business, right? So I think the only benefit of actually, you know, digging your hands into all these different honeypots is just, becoming wise. I remember focusing on wisdom versus knowledge a lot back then. We went through a lot of crazy bullshit, quantum physics. Not that it's bullshit, but like we learned a lot about life due to our core nature of being curious. So all in all, look, it's not that we've done the wrong thing. I think if we were able to focus and we had a mentor, we would be much further than where I am now in terms of wealth and success. But in saying that, who knows what, I guess, the cost of that also brings, because now I'm at an older age, in the mid 30s, we're getting there, where I've decided to move overseas, to actually separate myself from the social life, to actually focus on the business in itself, which is now a company, which is fantastic, to actually grow and learn how to scale. Because I'm a person that gets way too distracted. I'm a person who likes to put other people first, especially if they're in front of me, right? I'm a person who does like to socialize, but also is a homebody, right? A little bit of a hybrid. So, what that causes in terms of issues is that when I go out, I don't think about work. I just enjoy and relax and have fun, make memories and experiences, grow stronger bonds with my friends. But the problem is that when I get exhausted, I have to recover. So when I come home, where I'm supposed to work, I can't because I'm too busy recovering. And then there's all these things that come about, right? And it's just a cycle of low productivity, right? And even if I do force myself to work and say no to these events, then there's like the burden of crushing the other side where it's like you're always saying no to your friends. And then you feel like shit because the guilt arises and all that stuff. So, yeah, I did do something quite extreme in terms of moving to the other side of the world, but I felt like it was needed. We're getting out of our 20s, like for me, it was more so, like if my friends are truly friends, then they will support me in this journey, right? And turns out that they are still great friends, which is fantastic. And the thing is, now I'm able to focus and grow the business. I'm able to show up every day. I was able to get out of employment, getting out of the 9 to 5, which is a huge thing, absolutely massive thing. I feel like if I was still in Sydney, I would be caught in the rat race. I would be caught in paying high rent, or I'll be caught in a mortgage that just absolutely obliterates my income. Because another thing about focus is the great thing about living at home and having a safety net, you should use, not abuse, use it to create wealth for yourself, right? The problem we're having, like at that time, I'm speaking to the person who's at the very beginning of the career, like the first year within registering the business. The biggest problem was not being able to separate my room in terms of what the room is versus a workplace. Literally, it was roll out of bed, hop into the chair, and then work. That was the personal development struggle that I had back then, that you're probably having now, to separate those two. We love playing games. The same game room is the same work room. And that was a major issue, right? Because we didn't have the personal development skills to actually separate the two, right? Now that I'm a lot older, it doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter so much. Yes, granted, I don't really play games that much anymore, but I have the willpower to actually commit to work when I need to, right? I think the added stress of trying to replicate the 9 to 5, but for yourself, right? I think that comes down to, again, personal development, but not only that, the type of character that you are, right? I was doing 9 to 5 for the longest time. Like I'm 34 soon. But I realized something different when I transitioned into full time self employed. I wasn't getting sick anymore. I haven't had a sick day in the longest time. Whereas in the 9 to 5, I think even just the thought of knowing that you have annual leave, that you have sick leave, you're always looking forward to the days off, or you're always a little bit happy inside that, fuck, I actually got sick. But I never realized that actually, I don't know if we're built for 9 to 5, or I don't know if I'm built for 9 to 5, right? Because I always hated having a boss. The only places I could actually commit to working at is working under someone who inspires me to do more, or working under someone who actually I get along with on a very friendship level. So I don't see them as a boss, or the combination of the two, right? That was the only reason why I would stay committed into employment. Other than that, if it wasn't for those elements, and even those elements, like even if they were existent, they would dwindle out over time because there's so many other nuances and so many other intricacies of employment that really drained me, right? And what I found out was when I work in my own time, when I work at my own pace, when I work when I feel like working, right, which is still a net positive in terms of income, I actually feel a lot healthier, right? I don't get sick anymore, right? I still have time to do all the things that I want to do, right? I'm not a very extreme person in the sense of, high output, right? I don't have that sort of military sense where it's like everything has to be in order, organized, sharp, like what we say or the deadlines that we have, it needs to be done at a certain time where it needs to meet the deadline prior to, right? With the nature of my work, yes, I do get a lot of fantastic work done, very high value stuff, but in my own time, right? And I'm coming into a position now where I want to expand, I want to hire more people, I need to find the right people to actually help me scale and help me move into this next lifestyle where I'm taking what I've learned, what I've encapsulated, and then spreading this knowledge amongst others, right? So whether it's people hiring me to develop systems for them, or whether it's in this now new future that I'm trying to set up, whether it's people who want to learn how to do what I do so I can give them this experience rather than them trying to learn it for themselves. So going back to focus, again, it's imperative. I think what we were trying to do back then was to learn, and that's absolutely fine, right? I always take the longer route to do things because I feel like instead of, and I remember this clearly, there's like a running track, right? And one track has all of those little fences that you have to hop over. I can't remember what it's called. One track has a bunch of those where you have to keep hopping over all of them. The other one is just a clear lane where you just got to run straight. And then there's another lane where you can just hop into a car, drive to the end, and then there you go, right? If you finish the race. These three lanes were always present in life, right? The first lane was a lane that I was in. I felt like this is the right thing to do. You need to learn everything it takes to actually go through it, go through all the fucking problems in life, all the problems of business, understand it, like the back of your hand, because this is what is going to make you a better person. This is what is going to make you resilient. This is what is going to make you become the best of the best of the best, right? Which is great, but I feel like the lane right next to it where there was no obstacles, where you didn't have to jump over anything, I think that was playing life at normal difficulty. The line that I was playing on was hard difficulty, right? The middle one was the normal one, where if you just focus on one thing, you can just run straight and you'll finish 10 times faster, 20 times faster, 30 times faster. And then the third line where you do hop in a car, that car is owned by your mentor and you can fast track all the way to the end, right? That is a reality that is true, within the world of business, within the world of life, so to speak. So I think focus is super, super, super important. Not that we're doing the wrong thing, but I think this message to you is so important for you to hear so that it can give you clarity in the sense of knowing that you're doing the right thing, not necessarily the wrong thing, knowing that you're not focusing because you want to learn, but knowing that you do have to put everything down at one point and focus on one thing, right? Because then that will allow you to see things clearer, move a lot faster, get a lot of things done quicker, right? And the position that I'm in now, I've focused on solely developing systems for companies, right? Huge systems, like beyond my wildest dreams, like getting into, places where I would have never imagined, right? The crossover from employment to self-employed was amazing. It was very on edge, but it was amazing how quickly I bounced back and how quickly I made the money that I was supposed to make, right? If I were to continue employment and cutting out all the bullshit, like showing up on time, having my lunch breaks on time, uh, dealing with people in management, right? Dealing with just daily shenanigans, HR bullshit, all of that just gone, absolutely gone. And my life is just absolutely transformed in the sense where it's like, wake up when I want, you know, schedule my own meetings, show up for myself, make money that comes out of my own butt and nobody else's, right? So it's my own money, doing whatever I want to do, really. Obviously, most people say being in employment is selling your soul to somebody else, and being in self employment is sort of trapping yourself in your own hell, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right words, but something along the lines. Yes, it's true to a certain degree. It depends how you build the business, right? If you build a business that you don't like, then yeah, it'll feel like hell because you're doing something that you don't necessarily like. So I would advise to actually do something you're passionate about. Um, some people out there are very lucky where they choose something that they're passionate about. Sometimes it just falls into their lap, and then they build multi-billion-dollar industries out of just pure luck. There are cases like that, but for us, it's more so we enjoy a lot of things about life, but the more life that you enjoy, the less progress you make in business, right? I think to combine everything is where I'm headed, and that will be the ultimate formula in the sense where, ideally, I do want to run this academy, this program, this course, whatever you want to call it, where I can teach other people to do what I do, to help them run their own businesses a lot smoother, right? Now, looking at AI agents, the forefront of the industry, the forefront of the technology that I'm looking into, that's going to drastically change everything, right? All of a sudden, a few years ago, everyone was using ChatGPT. It was just insane, right? So, following the trend in my industry. And I'm only able to do this is because I'm focusing. Right? I think when I do launch the academy, I still will have the consulting side, but I will hire out developers to replace me. Right? Yes, maybe show up for a few meetings here and there, but that's the extent of me not focusing. Right? Just attending a few meetings here and there. The rest would be predominantly focused on the academy, creating turnkey solutions, really becoming super agile with delivering the service, the training, the program, whatever you want to call it. So for every version of me back then, every different timeline that exists of me, there is a point where we all need to focus, and for people watching out there, I would say the same to you. It's absolutely fine to explore when you're young, but when you get older, you need to choose what you want to do, right? For me, I see a lot of people going to university, going to colleges and all that stuff, and they're choosing what they think they know, what they think they like. But it isn't until they actually get to workplace and or they actually finish their degree and actually get a job where they realize, oh shit, this is not for me, right? I think that was the reasoning behind me trying out so many things back then, right? And funnily enough, still, after all that, I've done something completely different compared to everything that I was doing back then. Maybe full circle with the academy, where it's revolved around talking to people and creating content and all that jazz. I think maybe that's a full circle moment for me, where after all of this, I did choose what I actually love doing. But I'm in the transition to that chapter, so I think that's it for today. Um, Again, moral of the story would be around focus. So choose wisely. Okay. And look, it's absolutely okay to choose and then find out shit, I don't like this. If you're still young, you still have time. But the quicker you find out and the younger you are, the better it is for the future in terms of wealth, in terms of success, in terms of just propelling yourself into one chosen skill set or, role or job to become really good at that. And then everything in life sort of just becomes easier, right? So good luck with that. I hope you're well, and I will see you in the next chat. Ciao.